UFOs and has custody of the ones that have been picked up. They're the ones that run S-4 and Area 51.
I thought that was something like Snowbird.
Snowbird is an Army project to recover crashed vehicles. Project Pounce takes all the other recovered materials from everybody else and takes it to Area 51. Colonel Steve Wilson, who was the head of Project Pounce at Area 51 before he retired, and he headed the recovery project, and the same people who recovered them have custody of them out there in Area 51. It's in S-4. And the time came when he knew too much. They also have live aliens, alien extraterrestrials living there. And time came when apparently he knew too much, and he was given one of these fast-moving cancers. And when he was near death, he retired, medical retirement, and he came to the realization himself that it had been introduced because of some recent information that had just come into his possession that was super sensitive. From Korea, he was a lieutenant colonel, and he was assigned to Vandenberg Air Force Base, where he again fits his classification. He had no ties. He was not married. He didn't have any children. He didn't have any family. And he was quickly recruited into the program and taken inside and transferred from Vandenberg to S-4, where he got further indoctrination. Steve Wilson was born in 1930. In 1930, just 7 years after my birth. And like me, he first became an aviation mechanic and then a flight engineer on a bomber. He applied for cadet training. He worked for General Crabb, was accepted for cadet training, and went to flight school at Kelly Field, pretty much as I did. He became a pilot from being a flight line mechanic, career flight line mechanic, became a career pilot. He flew F-86 Sabre jets in the combat in the war in Korea, where he took a bullet in the abdomen that left him bleeding heavily in the cockpit. He was trying to hold his guts in as he radioed the position report and his remaining fuel supply, and then he seemed to pass out, lose consciousness. What followed after that seemed to demonstrate some extraordinary assistance taking place. The air traffic control officer from the 67th Fighter Squadron control tower saw an unannounced airplane entering the traffic to land. The airplane was strangely surrounded by a green glow as it made a correct approach for landing. The airplane is still flying, approaches in the landing pattern with the engine running, and the engine quits on the rollout on the runway out of a good landing. The airplane flared out, made a perfect landing, rolled out, and as the mechanics ran to the airplane to get him out, the engine was stopped, and they found him unconscious in the cockpit. Now this is days later, after he took the bullet. He doesn't have gasoline but for a couple of hours, and he's out of fuel. They took him to the hospital. He recovered quickly, and on subsequent tests they discovered that his IQ had gone to a high figure from a normal figure. He had suddenly acquired a very high IQ that they couldn't account for. His IQ had gone from 162 to 232, a very high figure for anybody. And as after this, he noticed an impressive increase in his extrasensory perception, ESP ability. Upon recovery from this, he was assigned to the 1st Air Force Special Services Command at Vandenberg Air Force Base. And I found that very interesting because shortly after that, and directly from there, he was transferred to Papoose Lake S-4 facility, and there he was briefed by a colonel that he was replacing on the security measures taken in transferring special craft from one part to another in S-4. He was briefed by a new colonel that he was replacing about the movement of ships in S-4. In time, he became the project officer in charge of Project Found. The project that's responsible for the recovery and storage of crashed UFOs. That was the Project Found, created near the end of December of 1980, was in charge of the recovery of captured alien aircraft. And this recovery project was made up of elite Black Berets, Special Forces troops, and special components used in, collected and used together in the recovery of crashed discs, alien discs. Project Pounce dispatched troops, recovery troops to the site where they closed off the area, effected the recovery, and then sanitized the area afterwards and restored the ground to its appearance before the event happened. And he first reported this in Italy in an interview he gave there just before he went into the hospital to die of cancer. Colonel Steve Wilson was now enjoying cosmic top secret clearance. Cosmic clearance is level Q27. And in this capacity, he was in charge of storing the captured alien vehicles and the bodies of the occupants in Area S-4. When he retired after some 40 years of active service, he was much decorated. I was sorry I didn't get to know him better. But he came, after he came back from Italy, he settled in Phoenix, and he was being treated there for his fast-moving cancer. And he had opened a website so he could publicize what was going on in S-4. He had the same feelings as Connor Orion. He felt if he had had a fatal cancer, and which he now knew he knew it had to be introduced by his own superiors, and he knew that it had to be because he now knew too much himself and became a liability to them. And so he, also feeling that this security was misplaced, he intended to bring down the whole house of cards himself with his website. He was going to reveal all that he knew about S-4, but his cancer worsened rapidly and he had to go into the hospital. He was under special control in a close observation ward in the hospital, where he and Bill Hamilton, decided to stage a conference in Phoenix, a UFO conference, where he would make his presentation and officially announce the opening of the website, and that he was going to publish everything he knew about S-4 on the website. And the conference was scheduled to be developed quickly. It was going to come off in less than 2 weeks from the time they got the idea. They rushed out literature and information to everybody they could. And I was going to speak at the conference, and when I got there, I learned that Colonel Steve Wilson had died of his cancer the day before the conference opened in Phoenix. The conference went on anyway, but we did not get the publicity release we expected Steve Wilson to engender when he made his pronouncements from the platform just before he was going to die.
A tragedy that he never got to speak.
It was controlled that way, I'm quite sure. This painting was published in the Italian magazine Notizie UFO, put out by Roberto Pinotti and Maurizio Baetta. When Colonel Steve Wilson was visiting Italy and dying of cancer, Wilson told him that he was formerly head of Project Pounce at Area S-4 and lived in the S-4 facility for a great deal of time. He said that he was dying of cancer and suspected that cancer had been administered by his own security forces because he was about to retire, and he had remained on active duty for over 30 years before he decided to retire. But they weren't going to let him do it because he now knew too much. That's what his feelings were. They gave him a fast-moving cancer to keep him from going very far, but he was visiting Italy in his final days, and he heard about a UFO conference going on there, and he went to see what was being put out about the unidentified flying objects. And he met Baetta and Pinotti, and after he told them who he was, they persuaded him to give them a deathbed statement to be released after he was gone. Baetta and Pinotti had a magazine staff painter with them, one Agnes Shojak, and they had a copy editor doing the review work, taking down the questions and answers and all kinds of additional notes. Agnes Shojak painted this painting by verbal description from Colonel Steve Wilson as she painted, with him correcting as she painted. You notice the one in Bay 1 is identical to the one that Connor Orion sketched. Notice Bay 2, 3, and 4 have identical craft with the same ship as Connor also substantially sketched in his drawings. I don't know whether Colonel Steve Wilson had access to my private files or not, because I didn't publish anything that I had up to 2001. But this painting seems to confirm what Conor Ryan had told us in great detail. This is what the corridor looked like also, according to Conor Ryan. Now, Conor was sketched and had also sketched a tank holding the alien bodies, and Agnes Shejak had made the same painting under the detailed description of Colonel Steve Wilson that shows 6 cylinders which show bodies in tanks being held by band around the waist. And notice the regulator on the side of the tank, just exactly as it was sketched by Conor Ryan 4 years earlier. So I thought that this might be enough confirmation, since we had no other information which we could rely on to confirm the Conor Ryan story, and I decided to release it at that point. He came down with a brain cancer, which is the kind that's introduced by intelligence to terminate people.
Similar to maybe what Jim Lorenzen had?
He suspected that he knew too much and that his own superiors were getting rid of him. He died in a hospital in Phoenix.
Steve Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't that the same thing that Jim Lorenzen had? He died of a brain cancer.
So did Dr. Hynek.
And Dr. Hynek as well.
When they get too much, and if it looks like they may be approaching a point where they might spill the beans, they terminate them. And that's the cheapest way, is to give them a fast-moving brain cancer. Colonel Steve Wilson, in his terminal cancer stages, he wanted to go back to Italy, and he went to a UFO conference to see what the world knew about UFOs. And he met Baetta and Roberto Pinotti, who was the vice president of Fiat Motors at the time. And when they found out who he was, they tried to get a good statement from him. And he agreed to give them a statement there in Italy as long as they didn't publish it until after he was gone. And he didn't want it translated and published in this country. So they brought in their staff painter, staff illustrator, to illustrate what he could describe at S-4. And he described level 2. He described it to him in the craft that were sitting in the bays there. And this Shojak, I think her name was, the artist, painted a good picture with him correcting it as she painted. And then she painted the bodies in the cylinders, in the liquid bath in the cylinders, held erect by clamps. And they didn't know anything about the Conor Ryan case. They were getting this from Steve Wilson. So when that painting appeared, then's when I tried to find out more about Steve Wilson. Found out that he actually helped promote a UFO Congress with Bill Hamilton in the Phoenix area, which I attended. I made a presentation at it. But Wilson didn't make the Congress because he died the day before the Congress started in a Phoenix hospital. So I never got to meet Steve Wilson. I didn't know who he was until after that. And you know, the Dr. UFO research, Richard Boylan, mm-hmm. did the last interview with Steve Wilson in Phoenix just a week before he died. Mm.
In the last days before Colonel Steve Wilson's passing, he granted what became his final interview to Dr. Richard Boylan. What follows are some of the most important elements of those conversations. Wilson claimed that Project Pounce does not exist as a unit in order to maintain the utmost security, but instead only came together for UFO crash retrieval incidents. Members of the Project Pounce team were summoned only when necessary. They did not know each other and joined the team because of their very specific areas of expertise. Wilson claimed that there were 33 levels of cosmic top secret, an interesting number in that it mirrors Freemasonry. At the top of the totem pole, Q33, is the Military Agency for Joint Intelligence, or MAGI. Wilson said, "No person knows it all except for level 33, people like Henry Kissinger and Edward Teller." MAGI's executive board includes its chairman, Henry Kissinger, Q33, and atomic scientist Edward Teller, also Q-33, now deceased. Interestingly, during the World War II era, history records that both of these men appear to have been simultaneously in the United States as well as in Germany at the University of Heidelberg. Wilson explained that Level Q-32 is Majestic 12, or MJ-12, a leadership board for field operations related to the UFO cover-up. Of Kissinger and Teller, Wilson said, both are MJ-12 members, which number 36 in all as of 1994. It might interest you to know that they go back as far as Project Paperclip, which was a secret program that relocated Nazi scientists into America to push forward the military, aerospace, and rocket programs being developed in the U.S. Level Q-31, according to Wilson, are certain aerospace manufacturing executives like Ben Rich of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works in Palmdale, California, whose statements on exotic aerospace technology are discussed in the UFO Hypotheses film Michael Schratt, Volume 1. Among other Q-31 aerospace manufacturers, according to Wilson, is Northrop and its facility in the mountains northwest of Lancaster, California, and Boeing's Phantom Works facility in Seattle, Washington. Leading the scientific apparatus at S-4 for many years was Edward Teller, Q-33. It was Teller who cleared naval intelligence physicist Bob Lazar to work at S-4. Teller led teams of scientists who back-engineered the crashed alien UFO vehicles into functional U.S. anti-gravity aerospace craft that human military astronauts could operate, like Lockheed's X-22A disc. Wilson claimed that this program, headed by Teller, was not responsive to command authority of the United States President. Wilson also informed Boylan that space warfare operations against selected alien visitors were being executed by military astronauts trained at a secret Air Force academy. At Boylan's request, Colonel Wilson drew up a chart of the operating structure of Strategic Defense Initiative, a diagram he nicknamed Star Wars City, made up of government, military, and elite defense contractor corporations. Wilson said that it was common practice for military officers to rotate out of military leadership into executive positions at these defense contractor corporations, a good old boy network, if you will. Wilson also singled out Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, whom he claimed had control over Decision Science Applications Incorporated. Wilson said, Decision Science Applications Incorporated is a group made up of all the heads of the military hardware manufacturing in the black area. Another elite defense contractor Wilson highlighted is the Rockefeller Company, a huge beneficiary of the Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization, also known as Star Wars. In this photo, Henry Kissinger is seen with fellow collaborators David and Jay Rockefeller. David Rockefeller has long been associated with high authority over the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, whose long-term globalist goals are widely known. For a more detailed report on Rockefeller influence on the U.S. government and military, see the UFO Hypotheses film, Aztec, Volume 1. Kissinger, said Colonel Wilson, is a key figure in MK-Ultra, which according to Dr. Boylan is a secret, ongoing mind control research and development project directed by the CIA and employs psychotronic devices, selective use of drugs, hypnosis, and signals and frequencies designed to influence people's thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Boylan sees a strong link between mind control and the UFO cover-up. Mind control research may have even earlier roots than is made obvious from the CIA and its Robertson panel of 1953, perhaps originating within Nazi Germany with Dr. Joseph Mengelé's vicious experiments and Joseph Goebbels' Nazi propaganda machine. Additional information on mind control is available in the UFO Hypotheses film Peggy Keane Volume 2, NASA Upside Down. During author William Steinman's investigation for UFO crash at Aztec, Steinman discovered that Captain Henry Kissinger was a leading figure associated with the first Interplanetary Phenomena Unit, IPU, out of Camp Hale, Colorado, just after World War II. Shortly after publishing his investigation, California police warned Steinman and his family that they had apprehended a man who appeared to have marked Steinman for assassination. Steinman quickly dropped his UFO research investigations due entirely to these threats. Wilson reported to Boyland that Magi employs Wackenhut as a private contract agency for assassinations and security under the moniker 1010 Special Security Squadron, and that the next level of clearance, Q30, is given to Wackenhut's 4 highest officers. According to Wilson, this 1010 Special Security Squadron reports directly to the National Reconnaissance Organization, but is funded by the tax dollars of U.S. citizens. Recall that chairman of Magi, according to Wilson, is Henry Kissinger. Wilson admitted to Boyland that even as director of Project Pounce, his own clearance was much lower. I was only level 27. That's as far as I could go. Boylan remarks that Wilson was sickened by Kissinger and Teller's lust for power. Both acted as if they were above all laws in Wilson's view. Appalled by their unethical and unconstitutional behavior, Colonel Wilson tried to go public with his information on a short-lived website and gave interviews to Roberto Pinotti, Maurizio Baiata, Bill Hamilton, and Richard Boylan in his last days to thwart Magi's evil plans once Wilson realized that he had been poisoned with cancer by his superiors. Wilson understood that Magi's plans include both controlling the most advanced exotic aerospace anti-gravity fighter vehicles from back-engineered UFOs, as well as manipulation of the masses through propaganda and mind control in order to force with invincibility their designs for world power upon an unsuspecting global population. Before his death, Colonel Steve Wilson, like Orion, Lazar, Uhouse, Schneider, Bill Cooper, and Philip Corso, helped immensely with shedding light on the Machiavellian world of black-budget defense and the UFO cover-up within the United States.
But he came out and told about the secrets of S-4, and he quickly died after that. He died right up here in Phoenix. But he had a real colorful history. When he discovered that his own people had poisoned him, had given him the disease that he was dying from, he opened a website, tried to put as much information on there as he could. I don't remember what it is now, but he died shortly after that in Hospital of Phoenix. But he knew that we have craft. He knew where the bases were. He knew that we had a base at Beale and 100 Beale and 100 Vandenberg. The 4 in the United States, in the zone of interior, and 4 deployed overseas. And the ones overseas, the host countries don't even know they're there. They're dug into excavated facilities. All of them are underground. All of the craft always leave from underground and return to underground when they come back for their missions. The Russians are shooting some down too. I don't know how they distinguish which ones to fire on and which ones not to. But he said that the Russians had brought down 3 or 4, and we brought down like 8 or 10. He had brought them down or driven them off. And you know, that's a dangerous operation. Those people are coming from power sources a lot more sophisticated than ours, and somebody may want to retaliate someday, and we're stuck here. We can't go any place to escape. When he first called me, he said, I'm bringing something I want to give you. And I said, well, I don't know. I get a lot of junk. He said, this is not junk. He said, these are some pictures. And so I said, oh, pictures? Okay, I'd like to see them. He told me that one of the pictures showed Dick Cheney standing with another scientist from that level there, in a smock in front of one of the craft in one of the bays. And this was about noon. And about 30 minutes later, I got another call from him. He said, well, he said, I checked out of my apartment and went to the bank to get money, and he said, I put my card in, and a sign came up on the screen, the account's frozen. Can't draw any funds out. So he said, I went to another bank and used a different card, tried to get money, got the same thing. He said, I got all the good cards. He said, I got $300,000 in the bank. He said, I can't even get any out of my checking account, which is also frozen now. He says, I can't come over there, I can't get any money in it. If you want to send me a ticket, I'll come over. I'm bringing some pictures. I'll be glad to show them to you. And so he called me back and he said, I fear the worst. He said, I can't get a dime from anywhere. I got $300,000 in the bank and I can't get a dollar. He said, I'll come over if I can get there, but he says, I can't get there. I can't even buy a ticket. I said, how much is your ticket going to be? He said, about $100. I said, okay, I'll wire you $100 right now. Look for the nearest mailboxes outlet near you. Whoever has a Western Union sign, give my name as the code, and I'll send you the money and come on over. And I did. Within 10 minutes, I wired him $100, and he got it. He said he was carrying the package of 52 photos on him. Becoming fearful, he decided not to carry the packages on him. He went out behind and got a box, a strong box, starter box, as a matter of fact, and he put the package of pictures and rocks in it, had the Greyhound station people wrap it, address it, tried to get it on a bus with him. They said they couldn't make that bus to be in on the next one, and he had to leave because his bus was leaving. We got in from the bus station about 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, now he's at my house waiting for the box to arrive. We went down there the next morning, and the bus station said they couldn't account for the loss because it was logged on to a bus in Los Angeles for that morning, and it was not on the bus when it got to Tucson later that morning. And they were making a search for it. We went back again another day later, and they were still searching for it. Never did find how they lost the package. Logged on a bus at one point and not off at another.
What would you guess his height and weight were?
He probably weighed 190 pounds, 190, 195.
Is that typical for a Marine SEAL?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah? They don't want him too tall?
Yeah, well, he wasn't too tall. He was, he might have been as much as 6 feet.
Did he have any unusual tics or behavior or mannerisms?
No, he didn't. He was calm and collected all the time. He never got excited. He didn't seem to be worried. He didn't fidget or anything like that. He didn't volunteer any information about anything. He was concerned about his health. He thought he was near death, and he was worried about his $300,000 stash going back to the government, because he knew that those bonuses are paid in such a way that if he doesn't succeed or something, they can collect it back. So they can always take back what he's been paid. And another reason is because it's always paid out of country in a foreign bank, which is illegal. And it's illegal for Americans to hold it if they don't declare it and pay the taxes on it. It was paid in there in such a way that he wouldn't be a good idea for him to declare it. He wasn't supposed to. Nobody was supposed to know he was drawing 2 salaries, one as a Marine and one as a Central Intelligence Agent. And the Central Intelligence Agent money was paid out of the country. So all that is subject to confiscation if the government gets wind of it. Of course, they have a record of it. All they have to do is move on it, call it, take it back.
Did you, while Colonel Ryan was here, begin to be concerned for your own safety and Jem Cox's own safety, your grandson, if Orion had maybe a psychotic episode and turned on the two of you? Were you concerned?
We never worried about that, but we knew that he was a member of Team 6, Delta Team 6, and we knew that his own team would take him out if he was characterized as a traitor to him, and they would we knew that they were after. They knew that he had stashed the pictures, copies of the pictures. So they're not going to do anything to him or us until they get all of the pictures. They have to stop that first. And when he left, there was still one stash to be that they hadn't found, hadn't got to yet. So
and you weren't concerned that he was going to maybe do something to you?
no, we were never concerned about that, but we were afraid if they ever thought they had the last set of pictures, that they would do something to the house, maybe burn the house down with him in it or something like that.
From those threats from
His
the
own
letters?
team, the Delta 6 team. We saw him going by the house in a white rented carryall a number of times.
You mentioned at one time in one of your tapes his actual name. I'll say the first name, but I won't say the last name.
Okay,
Derek?
that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
And have you been able to confirm anywhere else in any of the UFO information that you've gathered whether or not anybody else who's talked about having been in S-4 had known of this particular individual?
No, I don't know any other people that lived in S-4. There were 4 co-conspirators with him that all disappeared shortly after he got here. So they were discovered and moved, at least, maybe terminated, I don't know. The girlfriend of one of them that used to visit them when they were on leave in downtown Las Vegas hadn't heard from her boyfriend in about the same time that Connor had been here. When he explained what the package of pictures was, I became a little worried too. He told me that he was a sentry, guard at level 2 of S-4, and that he had become disenchanted with the security. What he called was the overplayed security, because all they had was junk. He said internally it's called a museum, and he said they had crashed saucers there. He said they had distant 7 bays on roll-around pedestals. I was watering the plants in front of my house, my little flower garden in front of my house, and I decided, and I was warming water for coffee also, and at some point I laid the hose down and went back in to turn the water down because it wouldn't boil over. And when I came out, just minutes later, I found a blue envelope, pale blue envelope, stuck behind the numbers in my house by the door. It wasn't there when I went in, just 2 or 3 minutes before that. And I left the hose running and took the envelope down, looked at it, looked inside. It was an envelope from with return address to the Imperial Palace in the upper left-hand corner on Imperial Palace Stationery. Well, this is the picture of the first message. When I was watering my lawn and I turned around to come back in the house, I saw this behind the sign, number sign, just like that. And there's the message that says, "It's to come home." And the Delta symbol is pointed up, meaning it's cool, just come home. This is the original page. The original message, first one found behind the house numbers on my home in Windowed Circle. And that was the first note, letting us know that they were there. And when I read the note, I took it in and showed Jim Cox, and he said, "I don't know what to make of it." He said, "Let's ask Connor." When we showed him the letter, his face turned white and sweat popped out on his forehead. He said, "Oh my God, they're here already." He said, "I was hoping we'd get a day or two." The visitor now became concerned about how they were able to keep track of him. He thought he might have a tracking device installed someplace in his body, because we had not observed followers. We didn't see anybody at the bus station. Everything looked clean. Nobody around the house until the message appeared behind the numbers on my door. And then an hour or so later, we saw a white van go around the house with 4 men in it that he recognized as Delta 6 members of his own team. He said he was afraid, because he had seen a white rented car go by with 4 men in it. He said, "That's suspicious." And he told us that he was a member of Delta 6. He said, "Those are probably Delta 6 men from my own team. They'll send my own team after me." He said he thought that he had already been compromised. And I said, "Well, if you think that and you got important information, maybe we should document it some way." He said, "Yes, we should." And so we said, "Well, let's go out in the desert. We'll find a high ground where we can see anybody coming from every direction, we'll videotape an interview with you. We did. We went out there and videotaped a 2-hour interview with him where he told us all of what he wanted to tell us on videotape. It was a surprise to suddenly hear from you a day ago and to hear what you could tell us with respect to some things that we've been doing for a long, long time.
Right now I'm basically kind of scared. I mean, I'm on the run. I don't know what everything holds for me. I just want to get this out in the open.
You said that they had 7 discs there. You're talking about disc-shaped flying vehicles or something.
Flying vehicles. All the vehicles are of extraterrestrial origin. They are not. When I first got there, it took me a good couple weeks before I could fully comprehend and realize this. I've always been an avid believer in life in the universe, that we're not the only ones, but this confirmed it for me in my own mind, and there are other people there that believe and feel that this should all be brought out too. But it has to be done slowly.
So we took a little camera like that. We went out there and set it up, and we videotaped the full 2 hours of him describing how he got to S-4, how he was assigned. He said they took his S-4. How he was assigned. He said they took his name away and gave him a number. Then they weren't allowed to know each other's names. They could only address each other by their number. They all had sequential numbers from 119 to 124, or 25 or 26, whatever it was. And from that he assumed that they all had been assigned at the same time as a whole new team, and that they must have replaced another team that was there because of the sequence of the numbers. And so after he had been with us for a few days, and we tried to find out if the others had been detected. They had all been removed, and a whole new team had brought in again, had altogether different numbers, and we never found out what happened to the team members that were on with him at the time. But we presumed that they were sent to different stations, not in contact with each other for some time if they weren't suicided for their betrayal. They may have known we were there and what we were doing, so when they got back, we had the tape that we had taken out of the high-8 camera and put it back in a cassette case, and about the time we got home, Bob Dean came by. And we told him that what we'd done and that we had this tape that we were afraid to keep. He said, I can find a place for it.
When I retired from the military, I began working for the Sheriff's Department. And I had some perks and privileges. I had a Sheriff's Department car with red lights and stuff on the top. And I used to safeguard information on behalf of Wendelle. Information that he had asked access to that he could not trust keeping it in his house. And he'd give it to me, and I'd lock it up in the Sheriff's Department safe. Of course, the sheriff never knew any of this. But as I said, we go back a long way. We're good friends.
So now we had it on tape, and now he's worried about the tape and what they'll do to get it. And Bob came by his patrol car that evening, and I told him, we've got something here that we're trying to find a way to hide it. Can you find a way for it? So he says, give it to me, I'll see what I can do.
And what'd you do with that, Bob?
Locked it up in the Sheriff's Department safe.
How effective was that? How long were you able to keep it there safely?
Several days, I forget.
Well, you kept it there more than that. You kept it there several months until we thought we ought to take it and make a copy of it before something else happened.
And were you able to do that?
We did.
You still have a copy of that?
Yeah.
Good.
I haven't released any of it yet.
I think we should duplicate it, and I know you guys know what you're doing, you know. I mean, I think you should duplicate everything. At least
we need backup.
by 3 times. At least duplicate everything, and I don't know, hide it out somewhere in the desert, you know. I mean, dig a hole, put it in a safe, do something with it.
He told us that they had made 6 copies of the pictures and had stashed them in 6 different places with responsible people that would turn them over to public news media if anything happened to Connor. He told me that they had taken these 52 pictures, including one of Dick Cheney standing there in front of a line of crashed discs there. So he's been aware of what's out there and what's going on for a long time. And Senior Bush was head of the CIA at one time when he became involved directly in the need-to-know part of the program and was taken inside. Admiral Bobby Inman is probably the head of the old MJ-12 group, which is now quite a few more members. They all are in this top secret group, have MJ numbers, magic numbers. They all have access to all the classified information in the MJ category. They all are members of one or another of the Trilaterals, the Council of Foreign Relations, or one of the other secret societies. And so they're all linked together. Among the group that makes up a council, they sit on all of the information, and control of different parts of it is farmed out to different of these entities. They don't all have all of anything. One of them has supervisory control of one aspect of the phenomenon. Another one has supervisory control of a different aspect.
What is the scenario that they're really terrified of happening?
I think they don't want the public to know what's going on because the box is too full of monsters. You know, you can't open the box and let one monster out. They all come crowding out. I think the problem is it amounts to a loss of power, probably a total loss of power to those that are sitting on it once the monsters are out. And then you can't put them back in the box again. And then the phenomenon will find its own level of acceptance and probably become an everyday reality for most people. Until then, they're keeping it on the lids on. I think that they have successfully made contact with one or another visiting entity and maybe are being helped a little bit in keeping it quiet. But he had it in the sheriff's safe, and the Delta 6 did. We were getting notes pinned on my door and in my mailbox and pinched in car doors from Delta 6 warning us that they wanted Connor to return. And he was still resisting, and we had the tape. He said they're not going to do anything until they get the evidence. They're looking for the pictures, and they're looking for any records we may have made here. And they won't really do anything until they get all of that. But he says they'll get it. And then they did. They kept coming by, and all the time that they were stressing us, it was in the sheriff's safe. They had no idea where it was. See, Connor was a member of that Delta 6 team. They sent his own team to get him. He knew all the members of the team. He knew that they knew how he thought. He knew how they thought. He knew they're not going to do anything to him till they get all 6. And they had calculated they had made 6 stashes. And they got to get them all before they take him out of circulation.
But did Connor and his 2 cohorts leave a set with an attorney?
They did. They took time to go to attorneys that each one, some special attorney that he knew something about that he could go to on a personal basis, and left the record sealed with the pictures sealed without any identification, but just a package sealed for that attorney to release it if he ever heard of any harm being done to any of the men. They were always intercepted. They found the attorney's house broken into one time when they went there to get him. The attorney was gone. So he knows that they're around. He knows that they're after him. He knows they're not going to do anything to him until they get the stash. We saw him a couple of times in the white van going past the house, but he knew how they operate because he was a member of the same team. He knew that they would take him out if he had been characterized as an enemy of the government. He'd be taken out without any worry on their part, and they'd get their bonuses for doing it. But he knew they weren't going to do it until they had collected all the evidence that could be revealed. And so he felt safe there until he was down to one stash, and he was afraid to go to it for fear they were tracking him and could get to it when he got to it, and then they would terminate him. On Friday morning, we were anxiously waiting the shipment of his package of photos, when at about 11:30 a.m. I went out to check to see if any mail had arrived, and coming back to the door, I noticed another of those pale blue Imperial Palace letters stuck behind my house numbers again. And we got a message from Delta 6, stuck behind the numbers of my house, that said that they had indicated that they had intercepted. They showed a circle, a package, bus in the bottom of the circle, and a line drawn through it, like a no parking line. And then, what do you do? What will you do now? A question mark. And a little more threatening, and they had 2 paper matches taped to the letter. This is a picture of the second message with the paper matches showing him, telling him that they'll burn my house down if necessary if he doesn't want to cooperate with them. And that scared him a bit because he thought they might do it before he was able to cooperate with them. This letter had a note and a paper match glued to the page at the end of the note. The arson threat was turned over to the county sheriff and the local fire department for file in case the threat was carried out. If so, it clearly leads back to the Delta Force of Area 51. We also now had the names of the chain of command leading all the way back to the Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, at that time. And we had attorneys who were most anxious and prepared to initiate such lucrative action if it happened. One time we were going to dinner, and after he told us that his Delta 6 people were around. And we told him, isn't it possible that we get intercepted or something? He said, it's possible. He said, I don't know what their orders are or what they're going to do. So we said, well, maybe you shouldn't carry your identification cards with just what you need, a driver's license, and hide the rest, because he had secure cards. And he took them out and buried them under the leaves under a tree in the backyard of the house. And we went to dinner, and when we came back, he went out to get his cards. Cards were gone. The leaves that looked like they hadn't been disturbed, and the cards were gone. So we concluded from that the cards must have had a tracker in the cards, and Delta 6 knew where he was when he's carrying the card, and also knew where the card was when he wasn't carrying it. And they just went over the wall and took him out from under the leaves and took the tracker away, which was also his ID card at S-4. And that was scary that they knew that much about him. They knew where he was every minute up to that time. When he lost his cards, they must have had another way of tracking him, but they always knew where he was. We weren't advertising the information that Connor O'Ryan was staying with us. And nobody knew it but Bob Dean, who was the deputy sheriff at the time, taking his staff car, police car home with him at night. And he knew that Connor O'Ryan was there, but Dulce had something he wanted Jim Cox to do, and they drove up there to do it. And he invited Connor to go with him, and Connor thought he could give him the slip and go to Phoenix with Jim. They didn't know apparently that Jim was going to Phoenix. He rode up with him to get out from under their surveillance here. They knew immediately where they went. They followed him to Phoenix and watched them there.
Do you think Connor O'Ryan was implanted? Do you think he had an implant?
He may have had an implant in his body someplace that they could track. They certainly knew where he was all the time.
Did he ever discuss whether or not these sentries were implanted at any point?
He didn't tell us that. I never asked him, and he didn't volunteer any information about anything. This is message number 3, drawn in red ink on typewriter paper beside my typewriter in my house at Winona Circle. This is redrawn from the original. I copied the original. I don't know what happened to the original at this time. And then they left us a note on my stationery, my paper, from Jim Delatoso's office with the NASA letterhead on it that I had by my typewriter in my house. We had gone and we come back, and it's behind the letters, numbers in my house, showing that they have been in my house, got the paper next to my typewriter, prepared their message, and put it off the side of my house. So now we know that they can get in and out. And it just went on and on like that for 10 days.
When did you first become aware that Wendelle had this visitor, Connor O'Ryan, Derek Hennessy, staying at his place?
Wendelle called me while he was at his place and asked me if he could stay at my place, and that Jem Cox would bring him up. And that was a few hours before they arrived.
And what was Wendelle's reasoning for wanting him to be up there at your place?
He didn't say, I didn't ask.
You have an extremely close relationship with Wendelle then, I presume.
Well, I've known him since the 70s, and we've worked on many cases together and traveled many places, so it was a normal thing for him to ask me and me to say okay without needing to know any more details. Wendelle's grandson, Jem Cox, came to visit me after Wendelle had called and had a guest with them. Wendelle had asked me if Jem and a guest could come and stay at my place in Paradise Valley, Arizona, and I said that would be fine. So Wendelle and this guy came, kind of a tall, rugged-looking guy with a scar across his face, lots of tattoos, kill motherfucker, you know, etc. on his arms, and had military fatigues on and a duffel bag, and was quiet but pleasant. And Jem had his own guest house that he could stay in, and I let John stay in the other guest house. And
Who's John?
Well, that was how he was introduced to me, was as John Connor.
Oh, it wasn't even as Connor O'Ryan, it was as John Connor.
John Connor. I never knew the other name that you just said.
Okay.
It was John Connor, and no explanation was given to me about who he was or anything. It was not necessary, so I had a little guest house, another one that he could stay in. That was fine. As the days went on, Jem Cox let me know that this was someone who needed safe harbor as he was deciding about whether to go permanently AWOL from his job up at Area 51 or whether he would go back. So to me it was, yeah, bullshit. You know, this guy is somebody just wanting a place to stay or whatever his game is. It just didn't compute that a guy who was AWOL from Area 51 would be here staying at my ranch in Paradise Valley, but so be it. Odder things had happened.
What allowed you to let him, a complete stranger, stay there?
Well, first of all, Wendelle had asked me to do it, and second of all, Jem Cox was there. And Jem Cox is no wimp. And he stayed completely invisible. I mean, we never saw him in the daytime, and he really didn't come over to the main house. And we'd see him walking around, and Jem and him were the two people communicating with each other. So even though the atmosphere was that of a violent drama, violent claims, it wasn't going on in a moment to moment. It wasn't obvious. Only occasionally, when people would come over that I was working with, would they see him in the day or night and ask, you know, who's that scar-faced guy with all the tattoos on walking around with some kind of bludgeoning weapon? And I don't remember what I might have said, but it would have been to try to dismiss it.
What did you think was going on while you were doing your other projects with your business and managing your own personal life and daily events. What sense did you get was going on with Jem and Connor during that time as to what they were doing, day to day?
Well, I don't think Jem was doing things on an hourly basis with Connor because he was working on our project, which was developing software for a supercomputer center, which eventually, following year, we did do and did open and did get going. And that's where I had various people from audio and video to computers to image processing coming, and I had little labettes all over the property. And Jem was part of that. So his main reason for being at the ranch was because he was working on that project, not because he was there as the concierge for Derek Hennessy.
So this was just a place for Hennessy to cool while Jem worked with you on his project.
Yeah.
Wendelle thought it was safer up there on your ranch than here at Wendell's place.
I assume so.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And also staying at the ranch was another friend of Jem's, who was a woman who had spoken at the first UFO Congress in Tucson about being a walk-in. Her name was Sheila. She had another name, Omnek Onyek. So it's a real contrast. We're working on supercomputers and recording stuff in my other little labs there on the property, and I got a guy with a scar and a woman from Venus also staying at the property at the same time. It was very colorful. He would stay in his cabin during the day and would literally patrol the property at night. I mean, he was a night walker and would walk around, and Jem let me know that he was concerned that people were tracking him and that they would find him. And the story unfolded in, I guess, a period of a few days, that he had been a security guard at Area 51, specifically one of the labs there. S-4, Area 51, all of that was just unfolding at the time. Bob Lazar and the discussions about all that were fresh. So for me, it was none of my business. They didn't report to me on a moment-to-moment what they were doing. And I don't think that if that was genuinely what was going on in his world, and he was continually on the lookout for people finding him, as could have been what those ninja footprints were later, that he would have told me what they were doing if they were going to go do something covert, because that wouldn't make sense for people to know where he was and what he was doing if there were people going to be following him or coming and doing something to us to find out where he was. So at least there's a little continuity there. But they didn't tell me what they were doing. They're doing what they need to do. I'm doing what I need to do of being a good host. But it started unfolding that he supposedly had been a security guard at the end of his career, which had included being an assassin of enemies of the United States, people that were whistleblowers or were dangerous. And he had photographs, which he did show me a couple of.
He did.
Of Polaroids of dead guys. Showed me photographs of alien in a tank, a UFO, things that could have been out of a science fiction movie, or they could have been what he said. It was just, that's what he was showing me.
What were the conditions that... Go ahead.
Well, it seemed odd that if someone really had been in these positions of authority and extreme activity, would find it necessary to convince me that he had done these things. But so be it. Maybe I seemed like someone that credibility needed to be acquired with, so I listened, and we'd talk occasionally, 5 or 10 minutes at a time.
Now, can you describe picture by picture? Do you see any of those pictures in your mind still that Connor O'Ryan showed you, John Connor at that time to you? Do you see them in your mind at all? And can you describe the nature of them?
Well, two of the pictures were Polaroids, and it was of someone dead on the ground. Two different people. You know, I can't describe the person. It's not something I lingered on. It was obvious that the person had been, each of them was dead, and that there was blood in and around the face area. No obvious bullet entry wound that I can recall, but, you know, here are these pictures of dead people.
And what was he saying to you as he was showing these to you?
Two different things had been said. One was that his job had been to go on assignment and to take out people that were enemies of the United States, that he had assignments, and that he had to take pictures as part of that. I don't recall that being said while he was showing me the pictures. I assumed that these were pictures related to that because he said that he had many of those pictures as part of his insurance, that he was not going to be killed, and that he had other pictures and had put them in containers in various places, including one or two places on my property where he had dug holes and put these coffee cans with pictures in them. I didn't know where they were.
Have you ever combed your property to find them?
Yeah, I did, sort of. I mean, I didn't. I just looked for where. I mean, it was 90 acres, so it could have been anywhere. No, I didn't find any, and I didn't comb the property inch by inch looking. I assumed
metal detector or anything like that?
No, because I, you know, when they left, it was plenty of time for him to have gone and gotten them and retrieved them, or maybe he did leave them. I didn't assume that he had left them on my property, which is now a big development, so the bulldozers would have found them if they were left there.
In regard to the other pictures, you mentioned alien bodies. Describe all the other pictures to me one by one as you recall them, and what Connor may have said to you about them as he showed them to you. And was Jem in front of you when he was showing these, or were you one-on-one with Connor at that time?
I don't remember if Jem was there or not. And the photographs were odd looking. Like, I'm thinking, these are photographs taken of video in still frame on a screen, and someone shooting the photograph. Because one of the photographs I remember was a bunch of guys, and he was saying, "Look, here's Cheney, here's this guy, here's that guy, Bobby Inman, and here they all are up on the rail in the lab looking down at the body." Well, that picture could have been taken at the State Department. There was no evidence to me that rail that they were all standing on and they were looking at something was there. Another photograph looked like a science fiction movie, a round cylinder, maybe 4 feet in diameter, with what looked like a floating fetus in it. And another photograph of a looked like a funny looking person. Couldn't make out enough detail to respond, "Oh yes, this is an alien in a work suit working in the lab underground." And I saw these pictures maybe a week, 2 weeks into his visit.
And how long did you get to study the pictures? How long did he keep them in front of you?
I don't recall, a minute. They were
Each?
kind of all spread out. I mean,
minute?
he had a lot of them.
A minute each or a minute total?
A minute total. You know, I was trying not to respond like a kid in a candy store, and I wasn't convinced that what I was looking at was what it was reported to be. And I don't remember exactly what I might have felt. I just didn't take it at face value, what the guy was saying.
In retrospect now, how do you feel about this case, those events during the October, November of 1991?
Well, there's a higher sense of probability of what was said around the whole situation being closer to what was said than I might have thought back then. But by his behavior, many of the things that he did were inconsistent with someone that would have had those kind of skills and that kind of training, unless he had lost control over his functions. You know, and there was lots of talk about he had to hear a phone call with a particular tone on it every 3 days to reactivate the subconscious programming that he had gotten, or he would forget these things, or he would behave different than he was right now. And it was fragmented, and it was difficult for me to put it all together into one package that this all makes sense. Yeah, he talked about his concerns of people looking for him to bring him back, and that he had photographs of the kills he had done. He had photographs of the extraterrestrial activities there at the lab, and those were insurance for him that he wouldn't be killed. He said that he was concerned for his life because 3 out of 5 of his group had died in the most recent weeks before he went AWOL, mysterious conditions.
They offered money to deliver the stash.
How many days along was that?
That was about the 5th or 6th day. And he said, don't let the dollars blind you. He said, you'll never spend them anyway. If we give them the stash and they get the money, you may see the money, you may have it in your hand, but you'll never live to spend any of it. And they'll take it all back. It doesn't cost them anything. They can provide the money to close the deal, and then that's the end of it. So we took his advice and ignored the money, and then they started making other offers about how they could forgive his misdeeds and things like that, and then that we would be safe and all that sort of thing. As long as he went back to San Diego, they kept wanting him to go home, is what they called it, the San Diego Marine Base out there. It shows the Delta symbol pointed up, which means it's cool again. It also shows they had succeeded in 2 other intercepts. What are we going to do now, the question was. And offering dollars, $100,000. It says they want all the stashes and no foul play, or the Delta symbol was turned down, which Conrad said means termination, and it shows 3 figures, Conrad, Ryan, Jim Cox, and myself, in a circle with crosshairs through the circle. Now this is getting scary. The $100,000 threat was tantalizing. Connor said that they would have the money and they would actually pay it, but we'd never spend it because we'd die before we could spend the first dollar of it. Noon, had dinner with Jim Dulce at a restaurant, came home, went to bed in one of the outbuildings that Jim had in his ranch there, a separate small outbuilding, and Jim woke up in the night paralyzed. He couldn't move. But his eyes were open enough so he could see down his torso like that through the slit in his eyes. He couldn't open them anymore, and he couldn't move at all. He was breathing okay, but he was afraid that something might happen to his breathing too. But when he looked down at his torso, he saw the feet of a ninja, black feet with black socks, heavy black socks, and a black tight-fitting garment like underwear. all the way up to a AK-47 pointed at his head. And he heard he saw another one standing on Connor's bed, standing on the bed, straddling his feet. And there was another one standing on Connor's bed with a AK-47 pointed at his head, straddling him too. And there was a man in the room in a suit, an older man in a suit, and he was going through Connor's little kit, just a little, like a shaving kit with materials, extra materials in it. He found a piece of paper in there, he unfolded it, looked at it, crumpled it, threw it over some fuck or something like that. Jim heard it hit the door and fall on the floor, and he took another paper out, tried to, looked at it, crumpled it, threw it aside also. And Jim lost consciousness. He doesn't know when they left. He doesn't know how they got in. He doesn't know how they got paralyzed or anything. Connor later told him that they have a gas they can put in around the window for him that makes them, paralyzes them, and they can then let themselves into the room and do what they want for as long as, I think he said they could do this for about 20 or 30 minutes before the gas began to wear off. They both went back to sleep and didn't wake up until late the next morning.
Did Connor O'Ryan say what he thought they were looking for?
No, he didn't have any idea what they were looking for.
And did he explain why he thought they weren't killed or done harm at that point?
He said as long as they don't have the last stash, we're safe.
When Jim and Derek Hennessy, Connor O'Ryan, were staying at your place and out in the bungalow, they had an encounter, they said, during the night, the first night they were visiting with you. What did you learn of that encounter?
Nothing.
They never told you a thing about that?
No.
Okay.
None of these were dated. This is an original. It says, situation extreme, please be patient, three stick figures, $signs, no TV, don't tell the television station. Working on deal. You have 7 days to produce pack or a Delta 6 signal for termination without prejudice. We want GWI to come home, GW1 to come home. Ghostwalker 1, that's the man that was visiting us.
That Ghostwalker 1 is Connor O'Ryan.
That's Connor O'Ryan. That's his CIA code name, Ghostwalker 1. And it said, we'll call again, thanks. And they never called. So then, later in the day, they found another note pinched in the door of Jim's car to go to a motel, a certain motel in downtown Scottsdale. And they would contact them there. Here's one of the original messages. Came on notebook paper from my house. And this was lettered in blue ink.
That says?
Says, we'll meet. Situation extreme. Motel 6, Scottsdale. This is the one that was pinched in the door of Jim's car up in Scottsdale at Dilatosa's house the day after they were gassed. So they went to the motel and they rent a room, and the desk clerk had a key on his desk, and he handed it to him. Jim looked at it and says, that's the wrong number. A numerologist said, that number doesn't fit. Give me another room. And the clerk didn't want to give him another room, but he finally found him another key and gave it to him. So they went to the room and checked it, and it looked nice and clean and everything, like nothing amiss. So they went to a store, I think it was Walgreens, and bought peanut cans of peanuts. And they popped the lids off and put them in a crack along the top of the door, so that if anybody tried to introduce anything in there, would knock one of the lids down and make a racket and wake them up. Then one of the lids came down in the middle of the night, and they also bought proximity detectors for outside lights. If you get close enough to them, they pick up the body heat or something, infrared, and they put one inside the door facing the door, and it came on in the middle of the night when the lid dropped, or the lid dropped right after the light came on. So they knew there was somebody outside the door. They tried to be quiet, not make any noise in there until they thought they were reasonably gone. There was nothing going on and no sound at the door. They opened it and looked out and there was nobody there, but they knew somebody had been there. That had, they could have introduced the gas and paralyzed them again, but I guess they had to get inside first. And they may even have had a key in getting ready to put them to sleep with the gas and do whatever they thought they were going to do.
So they never were formally contacted then?
Yeah, there was another note put in his car outside the hotel, too. It's just receipt for the Motel 6 in Scottsdale. This is the one that was interesting. The Delta symbol is up, meaning it's cool. 100,000 within 48 hours for location. No foul play or termination with prejudice. And the number 7 was also redrawn from the original, which I don't have anymore. I don't know what happened to them. This is the W-4 that I found inside of the wallet.
What do we have inside there?
Well,
That envelope inside.
he had gone to take a shower, and he left. Oh, you can't show those. They're Polaroids of Connor.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
And you can't show them, why not?
Well, he may be dead, but he may not. If he's not, it certainly would be his death warrant.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
He went to take a shower, and he laid his keys and money and wallet on the coffee table in the dining room. I was sitting there waiting for him. And after I heard the shower running, I decided, I better look in there and see what kind of cards he's carrying. He says he has good cards and a lot of money available, can't draw a dime. So I opened his wallet, and I took the cards out and folded. You can see it's folded 4 ways to fit behind the cards, between the cards, was this W-4 from the Central Intelligence Agency at Langley Field, Virginia. And it shows that he was drawing a salary of $72,725. And they were withholding $12,569 from that salary for income tax. It gave his correct name and address, a permanent name and address, was not Connor Orion, he was using a false name. And it gave this salary roughly equivalent to that of a lieutenant colonel or a colonel in the United States Air Force. There was a control number on the paper, 45851, so I don't know what that meant. His employer identification number was 95-659-3572. Wage was $72,725 a year. The permanent address on his driver's license matched the address on his W-2 form. Besides this, he was drawing the full pay and allowances of a special seal, Marine extras and bonuses, on top of the $72,000 a year. I was able to verify the name and ID numbers on the CIA W-4 document through other sources that I have, and found that it was still active at the time he was at my house, and he was still drawing his pay while he was there, in addition to his Marine pay. I knew that Connor Orion was a false name, and that he probably had other false names as well, but I had a permanent name and address which agreed with the permanent name listed on the W-4 statement from the Central Intelligence Agency. And so I believe that I had some substantial information on who this guy really was. He certainly wasn't Connor Orion. Connor was beginning to get scared himself. Up to this time, Connor had never touched anything in my house. We left money out deliberately to see if he was after money. He had been very faithful about everything and right up front with us on everything he said. We knew he didn't have any money, so we gave him money to eat on and for personal necessities, and But he didn't bother anything in the house until after his meeting with his mentor. All agents have a mentor who is responsible for the training and also responsible for the failure of their training programs. Every active CIA officer has a mentor above him who is responsible for his training and guidance and conduct afterwards. And if anybody fails, the mentor also loses some stature because he has failed in properly training his protege. And so everybody is affected. He's now failed in his training. He's broken the rules. He calls his mentor, so now the mentor is certainly in trouble also. And like all CIA, you never fully retire. You retire from active duty. Business is brought to you by the government to make you a good living in retirement. So he had called his mentor. Every agent has a mentor that is responsible for them. He called his mentor, CIA mentor, was a rancher over in Dallas, retired, and they never fully retire. And the rancher says, yes, I've got word that they put a hit order out on you, a termination order out on you. And he said, where is there a little airfield I can land nearby quietly that we can talk? And we told him about Ryan Field, and he said, I'll see you tomorrow. And he came in about 8 o'clock. Connor borrowed my car to drive over to Ryan Field to meet him. And then when he came back, he began to be devious about his answers to our questions. He didn't answer them directly. And he began to act differently. After that meeting, he changed character entirely. He came back, he stole my high-8 camera, hawked it, took the money.
Which leads me to wonder, we never saw any of these photos. He makes a number of dumb mistakes along the way.
Like everybody.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do to verify his story at all. Some of the same stationery that was in your house was used. Was he under your surveillance 24/7? Were there?
No.
So there were opportunities that he had to steal the stuff, type up the letters, handwrite the letters himself, stick them in your... do you think he was doing...
some of the letters appeared after we left, and I was, at that time I was typing on books too, and I had my typing all laid out there. And we come back, and the typing, my copy had been moved. And under the copy would have been a pad of paper that I was making notes on, which was the pages that you had there. The other pages I used was pages of stationery from Jim Dulce's office that he gave me in case I needed to make a note on what he was doing officially and send it up to him to be signed.
Do you think he could have had somebody else assisting him to try and fool you?
I think we would have seen him.
So it could have been that he was just disinforming for the CIA and...
He could have, yeah, been.
Percentage-wise, what do you think the odds of that are as opposed to him being a real legitimate S-4 Sentry?
Well, I think he really thought he was dying. He was panicked about dying. Finally, Connor asked for my car to go make the telephone call, and he came back somewhat disturbed and said that he had been told that orders had been issued to terminate him, and he was really worried now. At that point, we decided to raise his profile so that such a termination would draw the interest of hundreds of UFO buffs now wanting to check on Area 51 and S-4. I called a local ham radio station and asked them to stand by in case anything dangerous happened, either an injury or a murder in my house or burning the house to the ground, or any other threat like that, giving them some clues and contacts to put the whole story together in case any of this was carried out by anybody. All my calls were monitored, so they knew exactly what I was doing, and I also notified the computer mailboxes and had them stand by for a spectacular release or a story about our being taken in by a setup to discredit us. There was no contact with any of us Friday, and that was unusual because Friday was the deadline. On the morning of Saturday, November the 2nd, we found a plain brown envelope behind the house numbers again. This was apparently the end of the negotiations and the final kiss-off. The threat was plain and simple. No more negotiating. They would not hesitate to take out my whole neighborhood if necessary, and the reference to the term Malakia meant just that. I asked Carter what does Malakia mean. He said it was an entire busload of people were terminated to get one man on the bus. The rest of them were all innocent parties. This is the envelope that the last message came in, was addressed to GW1, Ghost Walker 1. It says, the Delta symbol shows cool. It says, Ghost Walker 1, situation no win. Any attempt to get any of the 6 packages will result in TWEP, termination with extreme prejudice. Dead. Of all persons, underlined, involved, no more games will be played. You have 48 hours, Monday, 600 hours to return to the United States government property, return all the United States government property. You have committed treason against the USA. That means his team will kill him off. Treason against the USA. After all, you are nothing more than a test tube program.
What do they mean by that? What do they mean by that?
Nobody can control you but us. You must return home. Your time is running out. We do have our own fail-safe measures. It shows the symbol, the Delta symbol turned with the point down, meaning killed. Remember the word Malakia. Think about it. Malakia was another assassination where they killed a number of people to get one man on a bus. Killed everybody there. So they're just showing them that we're not worried about people around you. You take out the whole neighborhood if necessary, but we'll have our way.
What did they mean by test tube program? Did you ask him that?
Yeah, we did. He said he didn't know.
That he was a member of a test tube program?
Yeah, he said he didn't know. He was his mother abandoned him when he was an infant, and he was his foster parents raised him. I don't know that he was even adopted by them. He doesn't know anything about his history. So when they told me it was a test tube program, he was ready to believe it because he had no other information about his family. Wow. Well, when he really got scared when he found out that a termination order had been issued on him. And he was a CIA agent. When he came back and told me that yes, there's a termination order out, and my mentor told me what to do. So evidently he didn't tell the mentor that he still had 3 more stashes of pictures. And he boarded my car and he went out and he came back. Then began acting a little suspiciously. He took my high-8 video camera and to a hawk shop and pawned it.
He was going to spill the beans, and he was going to go to a conference in Los Angeles, and I think it was Sean David Morton that we were going to meet, or he was going to meet, and he had we didn't see him the night before, and he said he was going to go to the airport, and I forget if we gave him the money for a ticket or what, and they were waiting for him at the airport, and he never showed. And there was a lot of phone calls back and forth, and it wasn't my job to be his manager to get him there. I somehow recall knowing about it or being in a couple phone calls or two.
How many days did he spend with you in total, Jim and John Connor?
Yeah,
Connor,
at least a month.
A month?
At least a month. So it was entertaining. I had other things that I was doing. I shouldn't say entertaining. I mean, it was just what was going on.
You didn't put a lot of credence in what he was showing you and what he was saying?
No, I didn't. Not at the time. Not at the time. But 2 events happened that changed my mind about the seriousness of the situation. He never left the property except one night. It was Thanksgiving night. My brother was having Thanksgiving dinner at his restaurant, so we did talk him into coming with us. We all got in the vehicle, had an inner gate and an outer gate. So we all got in my vehicle in the inner gate, and we left, and I closed the gate, locked it, everyone in the car, then went down the driveway, outer gate, open, closed, locked that. Came back a few hours later, it was dark, opened the outer gate, went in, got to the inner gate, and there was a note, a bag, a little sandwich bag up on the gate, and it was dark, so I just took it down and said, well, somebody left a note, must be somebody that knows me to get to the inner gate, so I threw it on the front seat of the car, opened the other gate, drove in, locked it, went in the house, everyone went to their guest houses. Susan Gordon was in the house with me. I heard a loud scream from the kitchen, went in the kitchen as Susan was showing me the bag, which had a chopped off bloody finger in the bag, and a note that we could read inside the bag that said, "Time to come home, grasshopper," or TWEP, which I came to know stands for Terminate with Extreme Prejudice. It seemed like this wasn't a note for me, so I went to Jim. Jim went to John, also now we knew him as Derek Hennessy, and it was decided that it was time for Derek to go. Derek started making phone calls, made arrangements that the vehicle that he could have come pick him up would only be temporary, and did I know someone else that could loan a vehicle or buy a vehicle. Or I made arrangements. They left in the one vehicle, met the other people, left in a vehicle that was a white van, belonged to a friend of mine who was going to loan it to them, quote, for a few weeks.
What happened to the finger?
The finger was taken by Jim Cox and Derek Hennessy, and I never saw it again.
His last words were that he would retrieve the last stash package and put it in our hands before he left. He would contact us with instructions again in a few hours. He had already lost 2 stashes, and we had the notes, penmanship notes, indicating that they had gotten the stash at such and such a place, and then another. First one in a locker. There's a picture of a locker and a circle and a line drawn through it. And the next one was someplace else, and the third one was someplace else, and he had a 4th one that he had sent over to Florida to an acquaintance there to hold and be released in case something happened to him. So they decided to drive over to Florida to pick that stash up.
Who did?
Jim and Connor.
Okay.
At the time, Omniconic was here in town, and Jim couldn't get anybody to go with him. He invited everybody he could to go along with him and Connor to pick up the note, because he wasn't that safe, didn't feel that safe with Connor either. And even though Connor was telling him, Jim, that you're one of us. You and I are from the same, we belong to the same people. And
Now, Jim was Navy, right?
yeah.
Was he Navy at that time?
No, he was out. He was retired.
So did Connor know that about Jim?
Yeah, he
or-
knew he'd been. He knew all about it.
So is that what he meant? You're one of us, or?
I don't know what he meant by it, but he said, you know, you and I were born in the same year. We're the same age. We have a lot of the same experiences, and that was true. So anyway, when they're going to go over to Florida, and they drove up to Phoenix first to talk to Jim Dulce about something, and there, between the 3 of them, they decided that taking Jim's Jeep at the time was probably not the best idea, because it was vulnerable. The lug nuts could be unscrewed. There was no lock nuts on it, and they decided to switch cars. When they left Dulce's shop, they decided they were looking for somebody else to go along, a third party to go along with them, and the only one that would go was Omniconic. She had guts. She got in the car with him, went all the way to Florida with him back,
And they headed off for Florida, which I didn't know then. Got a phone call that they were en route. Kept getting phone calls all along the way, some from Jim Cox, some from Derek, with these emergencies that were going on. People had shot at the vehicle, One call was from Derek that Jim had been shot and that they had to get him to medical attention. The other was the vehicle had been all shot up. They had to buy another vehicle. Could I send money? Could I send more money?
The first day out, near the end of the first day out, I got a frantic call from Connor telling me that they had just been intercepted and the car was shot full of holes and bullet holes in the door, and Jim was wounded, and he needed to get him to the hospital, and he needed $500 wired immediately. And I said, well, let me talk to Jim. He said, I can't. He's unconscious, man. And I said, well, how do I know that he's hurt? He said, I can't put him on the phone because he's unconscious, but I got to get him to a hospital. He's bleeding bad. So I said, okay, take him to an emergency hospital and have them call me.
Are you suspecting a ploy by Orion?
Well, I wasn't sure. I got another call in about 3/4 of the way there from someplace in Louisiana, and he said that he's getting better, but he sure needs medical attention. And I told him they'll take him to an emergency hospital, get his attention, have them call me. I didn't hear anything from that.
Then phone calls were happening. Derek and Jim had split up. Derek was calling me, telling me where he had left the can of film in a movie theater in Florida, that I was supposed to tell Jim where to go, what movie theater, in what seat, in what row, and with a knife to cut the seat open and to get the film. Well, after cutting up a few seats in that theater and there was nothing, Jim left, and that was the last I heard from them. I actually heard from Jim some months later when he was back.
Jim finally decided that this is getting too hairy and that nothing is working out, and he decided to come back without Connor. Now, when they were getting...
Had Jim actually been shot?
No.
So it was just a ploy to get $500.
To get $500, yeah. They're in Florida, and Connor is supposedly out looking for a stash. He's been the whole day for the stash and hadn't showed up or hadn't called him back. And they decided they're not going to wait any longer. It's just getting too hairy, and they drove on back and left him over there.
So Jim and Omnic drove back together and left Connor O'Ryan in Florida. And that was the last you saw of Connor O'Ryan?
No. They got back, and the day after they got back, Connor drove in with another woman from Florida driving her car. He persuaded her to come back with him on some pretext, and they pulled in and they spent the night, and then they were going to go to back to Los Angeles the next day, and they left, and I never saw him again. This is the car he drove back from Florida when he came back with another woman.
Did you ever trace that license plate?
No. Well, we have the number here. The Florida plate.
And you could figure out who it was who owned that plate in 1991.
We could. She had a child in Florida that she was trying to get back to, but he kept keeping her there so he'd have the transportation in the car.
Did he have any family that he spoke of or you knew of?
He never mentioned his family. On the W-4 was an address in Los Angeles and the name of his foster parents.
About a week after that last phone call from Florida, the lights all came on outside. We had motion detectors. And the lights all came on. And they went off. Then they came back on. And one of the lights was on that had never come on before, was bright enough that it woke me up. And as I looked out through the window, I saw somebody running. And got a little bit concerned about that. Turned off the power inside for the outside motion lights, and was looking out through various windows to see if motion. Had called the police, called Paradise Valley Police. And I saw someone go around the side of the house 5 feet away from me that had on what looked like a ninja outfit. All black, hood, mask. and started then powering, power on, power off, overriding the motion detector, turning the outside lights on, off, on, off. So the police come, and because of the dew and my little sprinklers on the grass, whatever it was, whoever had run across the yard, their footprints had made wet footprints now across the sidewalk and across the driveway. And they look like a one-toed sock, like martial arts footgear, which for me matched with what I had seen with what the guy had on. And I was a bit concerned about it now, piecing it all together, that people were looking for Derek Hennessy, and we had a chopped off finger in a bag on the gate. And it was all very violent in the attitude that was all around it. I did these things. I'm a killer. I worked in this government military base. They're trying to kill me. They're looking for me. I gotta go. There's people coming now. That's a violent attitude. It's not a lackadaisical attitude, particularly when there's people combing my property and there's a chopped off finger in a bag. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Now, with that name, you said you were able to find out from a contact in the FBI more information.
They were able to verify that the F-4 was valid, that he was in the employ, and that for a short time after he left here, he was still alive.
And also, so did they verify that he was no longer alive, the FBI?
They was never able to get any information on that. When the guy from level 2 of S-4, the Marine Sentry, came to my house to tell me what was at level 2 of S-4, he gave me a key to a locker in the bus station, the Greyhound bus station at Las Vegas. He said, there's a packet of pictures in this locker taped up behind the lock with duct tape. He said, you have to feel up there to find them. You can't see it. And he said there's 52 pictures in there. That we have copies of the pictures we take. One of the pictures shows Dick Cheney standing in front of one of the discs in a bay. In one of the bays is a disc with Cheney and another man in a white coat standing there with their hands in their pockets looking at it, talking. And so I called John and I told him what I was coming to Las Vegas to look in at something. Would he be interested? And he said, sure. So I went to Vegas. He picked me up at the airport. We went out to his house and had a cup of coffee and everything. I showed him the key and told him the story. And I had taken an 8mm video camera with me, and I wanted John to film me opening the locker and pulling the pictures out. So we went to the bus station together to get the pictures. John Lear, I called John and asked him to go to the bus station with me and videotape me removing the stash from the locker.
Tell me what your feelings are about John Lear.
Well, first of all, when I met him, he was an affable man, and we got along very well. And when he found out that I had been a test pilot before, which he had been, that I had been flying airplanes from the storage center that I had never flown before, which he had done, we had a kind of an interest in common, and he always was very level with me. But to others, he's a tough, outspoken man. He brought me pictures of a runway at Edwards Air Force Base that has a depression at one end and slopes that go down to a black door. He said that's where the discs are. They're behind that hangar door at the end of the runway. And I don't know whether they are or not. But those pictures don't show up on photographs of Edwards Air Force Base because they dodge them all out. The public doesn't see them.
Back in 1991, November of 1991, you got a call from Wendelle Stevens, and Wendelle wanted to come up from Tucson, Arizona, up to here in Las Vegas and have you assist him in helping find something pertaining to the UFO question. And that case related to the Connor O'Ryan case. a man who claimed to be an S-4 Sentry, who was discharged for medical reasons, and who had gone down to Tucson, Arizona to speak with Wendelle and basically tell him his story. He felt like he was being pursued by Delta Force, and he gave a map to a locker in a bus station and a key and said, you know, go there and find these photos. I want you to kind of recall as much of that, your participation in trying to assist Wendelle in finding this set of photos in a locker back in November 1991.
Yeah, he said there on the phone that there was photos, information, he needed to get it, he wanted to ride. I said I'd pick him up at the airport, which I did, and we went down, we found the exact bus station, the Greyhound bus station, found a place to park, and started looking around for the key number, and none of the key numbers matched. And poor Wendelle, he was going nuts because he had the key, he knew the information was in there, he just had to find the right locker. And so finally, after a half an hour of looking, we got to one of the supervisors there, and we said, we can't find the locker for this key. And he said, oh, they were all changed about 2 weeks ago. And so that's when we gave up. I knew if it had been 2 weeks before that somebody knew those pictures were there.
What did you end up doing with Wendelle the rest of
I think I took him back to the airport.
Yeah, it was that quick. He came up, you guys went to the bus station, the locker wasn't there, and then you took him back. Okay.
I'm the one that's doing the filming here. This is John Lear standing in front of the bus station just to verify that it was the station. This is a picture of the Greyhound bus station in Las Vegas, where the locker was that had the sash behind the lock in the front of the door. Well, this is the bus ticket from the Greyhound station with the sketch made by Connor showing exactly where the locker was, where we could open the locker with the, we had the key, and he was showing exactly where we would find the locker to insert the key and get this package of pictures behind the locker. So we went to the bus station together to get the pictures. When we got to the bus station with the key and go to the location of the bank of lockers that key would fit, all the lockers in that bank have different numbers now. The whole bank of lockers had been changed. So we don't have a key that fits a lock there. So we went to the people that managed the facility there to find out what happened to that locker, and he says, that's a concession. They change the lockers every once in a while. He said they must have changed it. I was arguing that I had clothes and money in there. What happened to the clothes and the money? And they said, they gave me the name of the concessionaire. We went to, yeah, this is me inside at the place where the locker should have been, but it's no longer there. And we're perplexed. We're going to go to the contractor and find out what happened to the locker. This was key number 424, and all 420 numbers were removed when we got to the bus station, and this was only a couple of days after Connor left there, well, within 3 or 4 days after the time it was put there. Taped up to above the locker on the back of the front door with masking tape by Connor. And when we never did find the locker bank to look in it. The contractor said he didn't know where it went, which we knew was a lie. And the contractor said he couldn't tell us where it was because he didn't know. Which seemed very strange. He knew where all the other lockers were. We went to the concessionaire and asked to have the contents of that, to look in that locker number, and he said, I don't know where we put it. And I said, you don't have a record? He said, we change lockers occasionally. He says, for no reason at all. He says, we just changed the locker. He said sometimes people lock things in there and go off and keep the key, and nobody can use that locker forever after that unless we change the lockers and change the locks. So we pick them up every once in a while. So we assumed that they had picked up that bank, and that when they opened all the lockers, they may have found the package of pictures. Anyway, it all sounded suspicious, like somebody else already knew that there were pictures, that there was something about that locker. We never did find out what happened to it and never got to see it again. He had no idea why that locker was changed, had no idea where it was, they didn't have a record of it, and no way you could find it. He said sometimes they get bad and we just bust them up.
Interesting coincidence, eh?
Yeah. Anyway, John Lear was involved in that, and then nothing happened, and we couldn't find the locker.
Have you worked with John in any other fashion on
No,
any other cases?
That was the only time where he was directly involved. And we were sorry that we couldn't get the locker, but we couldn't think of any way we could find it after a whole afternoon of trying to pursue it. They kept telling us about each stash being picked up. There were 2 left, the last I knew. And after his meeting with his superior, and then he was going for another stash which never appeared. He didn't come back from that, so I am inclined to believe that his superior got the other 2 stashes back for the government, and then he disappeared and we never saw him. Well, first of all, I don't think many people are going to believe it, because there is a very active and powerful government program to persuade disbelief of all of this. So the few people that will believe it are not going to be strong enough to take any action to do anything about it. It's probably going to continue as it has been for the last 40 or 50 years, and probably for into the foreseeable future. I don't see this making any big change. I felt that he was sincere in his feelings that if he had a fatal disease and was dying, it had been administered to him by his own superiors in a sterile environment, and it was to take him out because he now knew too much, and he had to be terminated. And I suspect that this is what happened to the rest of his Confederates at the same time. The government does not seem to hesitate about numbers of people involved. They could take any, and they even mentioned this in one of the final notes. They told him, remember Malakia. I said, what's Malakia? He said, that's another situation where the Delta team took out an entire busload of people to get one man. I felt at the time that Connor disappeared that he sincerely believed what his superiors told him, that he probably was dying of a fatal disease. He did not want to know when, but he knew that that's how they take care of their own, and he was fully prepared for it. He didn't want to go, and he was going to bring the house of cards down with him. That was my sincere feelings about this whole thing. He really wanted to get even before he was gone, and I don't think he succeeded in doing it. And it seemed to me that he was very sincere about this, and that's why he was trying to give us the information he was. I sat on this story for 9 years, waiting for the hook, waiting to see whether I was being baited or not, and nothing ever happened. And so an event happened in Italy where Colonel Steve Wilson was visiting relatives there, had gone to a UFO conference to see what the world was saying about UFOs, and he identified himself to the Italian sponsors of the conference, and they persuaded him to give him a deathbed statement to be released after he died, the cancer that he carried. And he did, and when they published it in their magazine, I noticed that he had correctly described the 7 ships at level 2, and he had described the bodies in the cylinders at the same level 2 of S-4, exactly as Connor had described it, which gave me the first serious confirmation of the information that I'd been sitting on for 9 years. But on the strength of Steve Wilson's revelations in Italy deathbed statement and the images painted from his verbal descriptions by the staff artist in the magazine, I felt that he was confirming in substantial detail what Connor O'Ryan was telling me, and that they really wanted to bring down the house of cards if they were being terminated. And now they're both gone, so we don't know for sure, but The House of Cards is still there as far as I know. The people went. I think that he probably was given a disease. He wouldn't go to a doctor to get a verification on it. He disappeared, and we have had no contact with him since, and that's now been 9 years. So I feel that what he was telling us was essentially correct. I think that he probably is no longer alive. I know that my phones were listened to all the time, my telephone calls, and even my computer. So there was not a lot of secrets here. He could easily have gotten in touch with me again if he wanted to, and he never did. I think the worst may have happened, and it's not over yet, because now it appears there's somebody that after some other people will be responsible for some of those terminations. And it may keep coming up again and again. There's peripheral evidence on something even bigger than this. There's a whole hierarchy of people that are involved in the operations carried out at Area 51. And it's a small percentage of the population of our country. But there's no way to get control of them, no way to get to them. They are operating independently on their own authority. And there are no checks and balances on them that I'm aware of. They can be very harmful to a lot of people. I don't think that we're going to get control of the situation, because I think the situation has had control of us for 40 or 50 years now, and we're not about to change that. It's growing. I was aware of government executions or assassinations internally when I was in the service. And that was 40 years, 50 years ago. So it's been going on for a long time, and it's part of our national policy, I think. I don't think it's going to end overnight. I don't think it's going to change policy. It could cause some heads to roll, but I don't think it's going to change policy. Remember, way back under the other presidents, Bill Casey, who was the head of intelligence. I was aware of government executions or assassinations internally when I was in the service. And that was 40 years, 50 years ago. So it's been going on for a long time, and it's part of our national policy, I think. I don't think it's going to end overnight. I don't think it's going to change policy. It could cause some heads to roll, but I don't think it's going to change policy. Remember, way back under the other presidents, Bill Casey, who was the head of intelligence, apparently was done in by his own personal staff because he said too much to one of the presidents one time, and he died in the hospital of mysterious circumstances. And he was the head of intelligence. So they take care of themselves.
So has this country been basically run by the intelligence agencies since the assassin?
I don't think the country is run by the intelligence agencies, but I don't think that the country controls the intelligence agencies. They do what they want to do.
So who controls the country then?
I think that there's a level beyond elective government that really controls the whole country, that our elective government is a sham to make us believe that we have a government by the people, of the people, for the people, when that's not really true at all. It's just to fool us into being sheeple.
What can the average citizen do at this point in time, being that this is so far along, 40, 50 years into this type of government? What could the average citizen do?
I think it's beyond what any individual citizens can do. I think now that the change is so profound that it has to come from someplace above. The change has to come from within the controllers that control the elected position.
And you don't see any motivation for them to
I
change.
don't see any motivation for them to change.
So where do you see this going for the people of the United States?
I think it's going to continue pretty much as it is. We'll keep it all under wraps. We've got a secret cabal that's running affairs that I believe has spacecraft on patrol that they think are protecting the country and possibly even the world, that can leave the surface under their own power, go into patrol, remain as long as their sensory supplies last, go back into their underground bases. I think that we have servicing carrier facilities out there now that they can remain on carrier patrol and operate from there for short periods of time. That Eisenhower was right. The military-industrial complex has control, and they are doing what they want to do.
Is there any way the citizens can get that control back?
I don't see how they're going to get it back, because none of those positions are elective. They're all self-appointed.
So basically, we're living in a fascist state that's masquerading as a democracy.
Exactly. And we don't, most of us don't even realize that.
How do you see it unfolding, say, in the next 100 years? What do you see happening?
Well, when this bunch dies off, it'll like up to now, it'll pass to others that don't want to yield power either. I think that at some point, the activities of the aliens themselves will increase to a point where it can no longer be covered up.
And then what do you see happening?
I don't know what direction our country will go then. We could either accept them as another society like we accepted the immigrants from Europe, or we could find them incompatible and believe they're enemies and try to attack them. They're always going to be stronger than us if they can come here and go back, and we can't even get off the planet. They might destroy us.
Any final thoughts about this whole big mess of a story dealing with Conor O'Ryan and Derek Hennessy?
No final thoughts, because I think about it all the time as an incomplete thought. I don't know what to think about it. Things like the ninja footprints and the chopped off finger don't match up with the fake phone calls on their trip to Florida, unless they were diversionary. Don't match up with the go to this movie theater with a knife and cut the seats open and find the things, unless that was diversionary. If it was diversionary, what happened to the guy? And if what he was saying was real, well, tapes like this will usher his demise. But maybe he knew that he's a sacrifice for the dirty side of covert operations and where it intermeshes with the extraterrestrial situation. But I'm clean. I was there. I mean, and as I said, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It is as happened. I have nothing to gain by making up for one version of this or the other.
Jim, thank you for spending the time this afternoon. I know you're a busy man. I know you got a big project going on here with Wendelle.
I am busy.
I just got to say thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
taking the time to do this.
Welcome.
What are your final thoughts on this case?
Well, I think that Conor was afraid, that he was really living the experience, that he believed that he was his superiors were getting rid of him, and he was frightened at that because he was in full health and he had money in the bank and everything to look forward to, and now it's all going down the tubes and he's disappearing. And if he's going to die in 2 weeks, he didn't want to know it because he didn't want to worry about it that long. He wouldn't let me take him to a doctor. And I'm sure that being a member of Delta 6, that he knew that they could reverse it if they wanted to.
And after this case had occurred and you're doing back investigation, you're checking with a friend from the FBI. Can you tell me a little bit about that person? And, can you tell me a little bit about what that person turned up?
That person found that the CIA W-4 was valid, was still valid at the time she checked it. He was drawing that amount of money, $72,000. He was still active, and he had been reprogrammed, had gone back to San Diego and been deprogrammed and reprogrammed. That's all she would tell me.
What convinces you the most that he was not a CIA guy trying to disinform you and
Well, he could have been. That's why we waited 10 years.
Right, but my question right now is, what convinces you the most that this case is still legitimate as opposed to being a CIA disinformation setup?
Well, the thing that I thought was most convincing was when Steve Wilson described the hangars bays at level 2, the same number of ships in them with the same design in them. And he didn't know anything about Connor Orion, or didn't know anything about Connor Orion being in touch with us, and we never knew anything about Steve Wilson until the Italians got those paintings.
Wendelle, thanks for spending the time on this case. I know it's a very difficult case. I know you, from what you've said today, you have your regrets about ever putting this case out, but I want to thank you for all of us that really want to know what our government's really all about. I want to thank you for your courage in putting this out and for your steadfastness in continuing to bring to the forefront all the most important UFO cases that are directed and you're exposed to. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You got some idea, I think, of how thorough the lid on this thing has been, and the extreme that the government will go to. I mean, even by terminating people. As I may have mentioned to you earlier, they not only terminate people, they destroy families, destroy careers, all in the interest of keeping the lid on this, the greatest secret in human history. That is in itself essentially why I violated my security oath in '91 and decided to come out and speak publicly about what I had seen and what I had learned.
And to you, we all owe a great debt for doing that.
No, what you really owe a debt is to Wendelle. He was one of the pioneers. He had the courage to come out and really walk the walk, as the saying goes. You know, many of us talk the talk, but this man walked the walk, and I admire him for it.
I was still being cautious about what I was doing, and then when Bob decided to risk it, I risked a few things, got a few death threats. Did you ever get death threats over the telephone?
Oh, hell yes. I was intimidated. I was followed in, black cars with no markings, sometimes with 2 and 3 guys in them.
Yeah.
It doesn't take too many guesses to figure out what's going on. But I may have told you earlier in another interview that I've been a maverick all my life, and I've been packing guns all my life. I'm an infantry vet. I'm a grunt. Nobody pushes me or intimidates me because I've said over the phone, I may have said it over the phone with you because we knew our lines were bugged.
Yeah, both.
I says, I'm packing, at the time I was packing a .38. I said, somebody pushes me too hard, I'm going to pull that out and start shooting. Being a vet suffering from post-traumatic syndrome, I can't be held responsible. I might shoot up a bunch of guys, and if they're CIA guys, that's too bad, yeah.
Now, we know we're all really spiritual beings. Are you guys planning a visit in the next life together? Say hello?
Sure, our paths will
I think we
cross.
passed before, and
That happens all the time.
Yeah, we're looking at a picture of 2 great eternal friends together, and I wish you much longevity and continued happy friendship for the remaining years of both your
Well,
lives.
considering that you're 85,
yeah.
I'm turning 79
getting
tomorrow. I'm following pretty closely. And I imagine our paths will cross on the other side as well.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Thanks,
I got
guys.
people in there waiting I got to go have dinner with.
to tell you about aliens and the alien agenda. Back in 1954, under the Eisenhower administration, the federal government decided to circumvent the Constitution of the United States and form a treaty outside of the borders of the United States, within the borders of the United States. Well, basically, a treaty from entities outside of the borders of the United States, and it was supposed to be secret. It was called the Greada 1954 Treaty, G-R-E-A-T-A, Greada 1954 Treaty. That basically said that the aliens could take a few cows and test their implanting techniques on a few human beings, but they had to give detailed lists of the people involved, etc., etc. Slowly but surely, the outer space aliens slowly altered the bargain until they decided they wouldn't go by it at all. And back in 1979, this was a reality. The firefight occurred kind of quite by accident. I was involved in, we were building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce, New Mexico, which, by the way, is probably the United States' deepest base. It goes down 7 levels over 2.5 miles deep. But at that particular time, we had drilled 4 distinct holes in the desert ground, and we were going to link them together with shape charge explosives. And then we were going to basically blow out large sections at a time. Well, when I was my job at that time was to go down in these holes, gather rock samples, check them for their particularity or particle count, give a detailed account of what kind of chemical explosive or plastic explosive to use, and then go from there. As I was headed down there, to my total surprise, we found ourselves amidst a large cavern that was already full of outer space aliens, otherwise known as large graves. I was petrified, as most people might be. The only thing I could think of doing at the time was shooting at them. I killed 2 of them, but by the time I could reload and refire at that time, I had a Walter PPK pistol. I was an engineer, so I didn't feel I had to carry a gun underground. And I always carried this particular one. It's nice and small, and it's quite effective. But anyway, I killed a couple of these things, and at that time there was several other groups of people down there. It's about 30 people total, and 30 to almost 40 or more came down there, and they all got killed. Basically what had occurred was that we surprised a whole under mountain base of existing aliens, and later I was to find out that we are not the highest on the food chain. These aliens have probably been living on our planet for different groups of aliens anyway, short and the tall grays at least, for a million years living here. And this could explain a lot of the theory behind the ancient theory of ancient astronauts and these other kinds of things like that. Might also explain the bloodthirstiness of different kinds of native populaces like the Aztecs, etc., Olmecs and whatnot. Anyway, I got shot basically here, and their kind of weapon wasn't really a gun-like thing. It was kind of like a box that they had on their body that they could manipulate. And it burned a hole in me, and it split my ribs apart, and kind of gory and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it also gave me a high dose of rather nasty cobalt radiation. And I have cancer to this day. It's probably a result of it, although I can't prove that. I'm laying down my life by talking about secret things, that I took an oath of secrecy and said that if I broke that oath of secrecy, I am guilty of espionage. I am called a traitor by my own government for blowing the whistle. That's not only a disgrace, but it's an outrage and has ramifications on everyone in this room. And I think we can do better.